whatever this process is, have turned their heads into jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah.
You got to try it at least once.
You got to try it at least once.
Yeah, if they get to
I tried it in college. Welcome back to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and I am with Ari and Adam. What? That's right. By popular demand, we brought back Ari, the man, the myth, the legend. He was searching for questions. Nope, he was searching for answers.
But I found questions.
But he found questions.
He found only questions.
He's here to present them to us.
Hello?
Oh,
that's a question.
Man, hey.
Hello?
Yeah,
question mark?
Fair enough. This is the Obojima Podcast, our weekly writers meetings where we where we sit down and talk about Obojima, the mysterious fantasy world we came up with a year ago.
Yeah.
Was when we started writing this.
It's almost a year to the days.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, it's getting close.
Which is crazy. So what you're hearing now is actually the continuation development of that world. And we've got a very exciting episode for us today, I think. At least I'm excited.
It's very thematic.
It's very thematic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is jack-o'-lanterns? That doesn't sound too exciting. It's our Halloween episode. Woo! It's jack-o'-lanterns. And it's their importance in Obojima, and it's a group of people potentially.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We don't really know yet.
We don't know yet. So there's very evocative art that's been illustrated by one of our artists, Vargai, of jack-o'-lanterns existing in Obojima or existing in general, and a group of people that are obsessed with them or utilize them in some capacity. We also have introduced jack-o'-lantern style magic, right? We have. Mm-hmm. I think create jack-o'-lantern or summon jack-o'-lantern, where it makes a giant jack-o'-lantern prison around someone, or maybe a way to help a person. I don't know.
A giant jack-o'-lantern party house.
Party house, yeah. They do exist. I mean, the spell does create them, and they last for, I think, a year before they start to fall apart.
That's cool.
So you could make a little house out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have jack-o'-lantern based magic. And I think the easiest thing to do is just to flash up some of this artwork as we're talking about it. But let's jump into it. So what's going on here? You know, I'll pull my phone back up. We were looking at this. You know, we have this group of people who utilize jack-o'-lanterns in some way for their magic. They're seemingly mostly witches. So I think we were discussing the possibility that it's a new budding coven that's starting up on the island that isn't one of the major 6. But if you read into the fine details, there used to be 7 covens, and then one of them disappeared suddenly, and the Fishhead coven acquired some of their assets. And so it went from 7 to 6. And so maybe this new witch coven could be, you know, eyeing for that 7th spot, which could be cool.
Yeah, I mean, and another question is like, how recent is this jack-o'-lantern? Like, if these are naturally occurring, like let's say jack-o'-lanterns, like a pumpkin vine just kind of grows in Obojima, and then when the pumpkins they kind of sprout and grow, they grow with those faces already on them, and they're lit up like that, and they've just always been that way. And then maybe recently witches have kind of noticed that and then found some, you know, way of, you know, interfacing with like the spirit that is inside the plant, or it could be that they are just regular pumpkins, and then these witches have used some kind of spell or poured some potion on the ground, and now these jack-o'-lanterns form, and it's kind of their sort of they've initiated this transformation.
What if rather than having companion spirits, like because a companion spirit is intelligent and has its own desires and needs and things like that, what if these witches have almost found a way to guide like pest spirits as they because a pest spirit transitioning or coming from the spirit realm into the physical realm for the first time is going to pick a form and it's going to exist. And maybe they almost have like a ritual where it's like, as they're transitioning from the spirit realm into the physical, they guide them into the pumpkin. And now they have this jack-o'-lantern that they can kind of control and manipulate.
It's kind of cool though. So that if that's the case, then the face on the jack-o'-lantern either is there first and it attracts a certain kind of spirit that's kind of associated with that expression, or it's the reverse, right? Where you have these pumpkins that one of these spirits enters and then a face emerges that is this thing. And of course it emerges for the first time and it's lit from within because of the spirit. And so you could have a lot of fun there. And then that's their, that's basically their companion spirit. It's kind of cool. I mean, there's a lot of the imagery that you shared that has witches with multiple jack-o'-lanterns. So there's almost either like maybe it's a herd mentality of these jack-o'-lanterns that kind of group up or something. Do they talk, do you think?
That's the next question is like, by making them pest spirits, they don't speak, right? They're more akin to like mice who like to mess around with you and have fun. And so like making them lower on the intellectual scale to make them more like pets could be interesting. If we make them all higher intelligent and more like companions, then it gets down to the question of like, why are they all with this one witch? Like let's say a witch has 7 pumpkins. There's that artwork of the witch that's like floating as all the pumpkins are carrying her. Why would they have so many companions? It would make more sense if they were like pets almost, in my opinion.
It's interesting. Like it could be that these pumpkins are created as homes for these spirits, but they could there could be a thing where they're created as traps as well. So. And that could be determined by the face. If the face is a grumpy face on the jack-o'-lantern, then it's a trap, and the spirits are encased in there. And then if it's a happy face, it could be that the spirits found it as a home. And then that once you take a certain kind of spirit and put it in the jack-o'-lantern, then that jack-o'-lantern might have properties or spells, abilities that the spirit has. Like maybe one actually shoots a bit of fire, or the other one, all those spirits were like levitating, where that witch was kind of sitting on the pumpkins and there was like levitating. Or another one could talk or translate languages, or
the idea of like a chattering jack-o'-lantern is pretty cool. I think that's really neat.
Maybe it's something that the witches do, like almost like a promotion, where it's like they're all like, none of them talk. They're all like, maybe they all like, maybe they chatter, but it's all gibberish. Like they're all like laughing or something.
But then cackling.
But then a few of them, the witch can like awaken. Oh, guys, this should be a subclass too.
Said the words.
I'm sorry, but it actually would be so cool. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I think you
could explore it.
Do we do it on this episode?
No, I think it's a different
episode. Okay,
but I think even if it was a coven, these were the affectations of that coven, I still think you get a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah,
especially being able to see just like a group of these, witches, and they all have their certain number of jack-o'-lantern pals. That's really cool.
Well, I think it is a coven. I think it's its own group. I think it's its own organization. I still like the idea that Ari mentioned earlier, potentially it being the island. But I also think that like if they really have all of these unique magics that they have kept to themselves and maybe learned, then maybe it's a thing that can be passed down, or like can be like it's a thing that can be learned. I think collecting more pumpkins is really interesting. Like each witch having, like if you only have two jack-o'-lanterns, maybe you're like you're pretty low on the totem pole almost.
Is there a shelf life for these jack-o'-lanterns? Like, do they like? It's not a permanent thing. You know what I mean? Like, is there something that happens where it's like, they're around for a day, or even if it's just not permanent, right? Like, there's you mentioned that spell that creates a dragon, a big jack-o'-lantern, and it lasts for a year because then it starts to rot, right? And so I'm wondering if there's something like this where these are kind of semi-permanent, I guess, receptacles for spirits, and then they kind of go away. Or
it could be that's the reason that they're growing them constantly. It's like, oh yeah, they only last for a month.
Yeah.
Could also be that this thing is like, there's a couple ways to play with it. Like you can make 5 medium wands, 20 small wands, or 1 huge one. And then it could also be that they're stackable. Like if you have
Snowman
a bunch
logic.
of them,
Yeah.
well, stackable that way, but also stackable like spell wise. Like if you have a bunch of them, they can operate in tandem and create like one big effect, which like absorbs all their energy, and then they all kind of wither and or like puff, explode in a puff of sparks.
Barrage of pumpkin seeds.
Yeah.
I again, not to add in to the subclass conversation, because I want to get
doing
back.
it now.
I know. I will, very briefly, and then we will be back to not subclass talk.
Oh, we're going to talk about it.
I know,
because it's like now it's not a dense planetary body, and we're just kind of sucked into the gravitational pull. So,
but it would, as a mechanic, it is interesting to trade to get something, which I always love in subclasses. So it's like, let's say you have 7 pumpkins, and each pumpkin has a cool effect that it can do, and you can consume one of the pumpkins by destroying it and gain some other benefit that's like powerful, but then you've lost one of your I lost my buff pumpkin, or I lost my pumpkin that's healing me.
So the question then is, like, if that's the case, like, why pumpkins, and why not just like any other gourd or vegetable?
It could be other gourds. Perhaps pumpkins just have latent magic that's
the thing to explore then, right? Like what in Obojima is special about pumpkins, or not just pumpkins, special about jack-o'-lanterns? Because like that's the thing here, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something about carved face in a pumpkin that has some property.
Yeah. So how did jack-o'-lanterns get started on Obojima? What was the first jack-o'-lantern like, right? Because someone's going to correct me, because I know I don't have the history of jack-o'-lanterns down right, but it's Celtic, right? Am I wrong in that? Isn't it like an old tradition to carve a face into a pumpkin?
Probably.
To like ward off spirits, like you put the candle and it wards spirits off. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I
mean, it feels right.
It feels right.
It feels right.
Don't look it up. Just pretend like I'm right, everyone.
Yeah, just pretend they're right. Yeah.
Just
there's no need. Resist the urge to correct.
Resist the urge, correct.
Yes.
So what would be the first initial cause? Did it naturally occur?
I like that.
I'm
just gonna plant the flag right now. Yeah. Bam.
You like that they just grow that way.
I like that they grow that way. Yeah, and that they have a happy face or a grimacy face, like, and that means something.
Okay,
that's interesting.
I like that. I like that it grows. That they grow naturally. Like it's like there's pumpkins,
like that,
and then
light,
there's jack-o'-lanterns.
The light isn't necessarily somebody put a candle in it. It's like the light's coming from some other spirit force, or
I think maybe it's like kind of like elves, where you grow a pumpkin and like 1 in 10 pumpkins is a jack-o'-lantern, and that's special.
Yeah, if we decide to go the natural route, if it's like, you have a pumpkin patch and then one of these witches comes and then, either pours a potion or casts a spell or something, or brings spirits in, and then when the spirit hits the pumpkin, it transforms, and then the face emerges.
Yeah.
It could be like that, but I like those two.
I do like the idea of, as spirits because that's not something we've explored really, is as spirits transition into the real world, they pick a form, right? Like maybe they don't pick a form, maybe the form's chosen for them, but a form shifts from what they look like in the spirit realm to what they look like in the physical realm. And so a pest spirit or one of these small spirits might turn into a little seed pod with a propeller and fly around, and one of them might turn into a mossling, and another one could turn into like a dust bunny type creature. And I like the idea of a witch who has been able to harness that, or like manipulate that in some capacity to put a funnel out, a net, almost like fishermen that are catching some of these spirits and funneling them into a jack-o'-lantern. And even if they can harness that ability for just a short time, they still are able to do it.
I mean, could it be like a symbiotic relationship where witches grew these pumpkins and then just happened to like attract spirits? Like they built a special blend of pumpkins that once they grew them, and they had some sort of intention behind it. They're like, well, if we can do this special pumpkin thing and then cast the spells on the seeds and plant them, like that would attract spirits. And
so I guess my question then is like, is it something special about pumpkins or specifically about the jack-o'-lantern form of the pumpkin? Right? Because this goes back to like, is this faction about pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns?
Right.
That's really the question to me, or that's going to like guide a lot of this. If it's about jack-o'-lanterns, that tells us like there's something about the depiction of a face on the surface of a pumpkin that is somehow attractive to spirits, right? There's something that will lure them in or lure them to it, and this faction either figured that out or they've just kind of exploited that fact, right? Or they're just kind of they've built their magic around that. They found extensions of magic around beyond just, hey, spirits come in. Now I just have some spirit friends. They created a magic system, a degree, or at least a suite of spells that are associated with this that have set them apart from other factions. Right? There's something different about them.
So, just like in that thing, like so, you're saying that they've grown these pumpkins and then they carve the faces into them, and in the act of carving those faces, it did some kind of magic in the spirit.
Maybe like it might be like this magnetic, pull of just like when a spirit comes over, whoosh, they kind of snap to it, or it's the other way around too, right? Where if it is about pumpkins, and not jack-o'-lanterns, but spirit entering the pumpkin, and that transfer is what creates the jack-o'-lantern, and now it's a special object, right? So it really depends on that. But I like the idea of the jack-o'-lantern being the thing. It's not because you can grow pumpkins and it's not okay. That's fine, but like there's something about having a spirit in there that's what makes this jack-o'-lantern special.
Is the carving of the jack-o'-lantern face, is that like a ritual magic then?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about one of the things we mentioned was the idea of them being maybe either a colloquial name for this group or the carvers, right? And it's just like they part of your affiliation with this faction might be having a special pumpkin carving knife, and this is what you do. You're basically inscribing runes, but the runes look like faces, right? Like that's kind of what this is. This is a take on a rune mage.
I think that's great. I think I think it combines the like, okay, we're guiding spirits. The ritual involves carving a pumpkin to create a home and a body. Like it's the ritual is about forming a body.
It's kind of like
a golem for the spirit. I think that's great. I think that adds a lot of culture in like the importance of a carving knife. It involves culture in like this ritual, like how many witches come to do it. Is it important? Is your first jack-o'-lantern, how important that is in the coven?
And does it happen once a year?
Does it happen once a year?
Or is this something that
does it happen on
constant?
Yeah, maybe during the solstices.
I mean, it could be like like I'm thinking of like the Taurid meteors that come every 6 months or something like that, or every year. And maybe there's this rush of these certain kinds of spirits, like jack-o'-lantern spirits, and they kind of come through Obojima, and at that moment, all the carvers come and they get their runic knives and they carve, and then they go out in the field and hope to catch
siphoning off. So that's pretty cool. That's a great image, right? That's really cool.
You could see them like coming down through the clouds or something.
I'm almost imagining spirits like fish traveling
in a school,
up in the school, or almost like kind of like the Wada Wada from Boy and the Heron. Where it's like, they're going to the next thing. Like you could almost imagine that some of these witches could be like, oh, I sense it in the air. There's going to be a transition. And so they're like, it's probably going to happen on the full moon. The full moon's coming soon. And they all like, maybe like during that week they can see like, because we talked about natural magic forming bubbles in the world. So maybe they could like, they walk over and one of them cuts into a tree and bubbles start like,
yep.
And they're like, okay. it's happening. Everyone,
Yeah.
all the witches gather, and everyone
time.
carves
Yeah.
pumpkins for a week, and they all set them out, and
Yeah.
they put salt circles and all of these things, and they light candles all throughout the pumpkin field.
Yeah.
And they all actively, you could almost imagine too, like when one person gets their jack-o'-lantern, they like stop what they're doing and they run over and help the next person. Like it's all a community thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to get it done quickly. Yeah.
You could imagine one, like you said, one giant pumpkin, and there's like 4 or 5 witches, and they're all like focusing, trying to like bring a big spirit into it or something like that. Or maybe one of these pumpkins is not a big spirit. It's like hundreds of pest spirits. They're like
all buzzing together.
They're all
in it.
filtering
Yeah.
tons and tons
yeah.
of pest spirits. And you can like whenever a spirit locks in, the jack-o'-lantern glows and its face shifts to whatever resembles the spirit.
That's kind of cool because like it also opens up different things where most of the time you can you have the jack-o'-lantern, the spirit comes in, you put the top of the jack-o'-lantern on, it's in, right? But you might have certain things where if it's particularly restless, or maybe you did capture more than you're supposed to in it, and you might have kind of spontaneous things that happen to this jack-o'-lantern, right? Something might grow out of it, or something might, some crackling magic might happen, and so you might have this idea of just, we kind of understand what we're doing, but sometimes things can either get out of hand or unpredictable things can happen.
Pumpkin quirks. This feels like a chapter, like not like oh, here's a location and here. This feels like I could detail this for days.
Pumpkin Patch Island.
Do we make it the island?
I mean, if
fun.
that's part of let's say that's the migratory path, right? You're talking about this, this surge of kind of spirits that are all schooled together, right? And that might be why it's here, right? That they kind of surge over the island, and like that's the thing that they're, this coven. And if it's a new coven, and that's why they're kind of scrambling to do this, they don't have these long traditions yet. Like they're we're figuring this out.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really fun that you don't really get oftentimes with magical traditions, that it's kind of, they're on the cutting edge of this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to we've been doing this for centuries and it's been passed down, and like, this is exactly how you do it. And people are like, nope, I think if I carve this kind of face, I could get, and it, yep, maybe
Sometimes
like we're figuring it out.
I like.
That's cool.
I also like the idea of putting the player character, if they are a subclass of this domain, when you get past like a 9th level character, they're like, we didn't know we could, like, you would be coming when you come back to the village or when you come back to the island and you share the things that you've learned to do, everyone would be like, teach it to us now. Like, inscribe it. We talk to the scribes. Like, we need to record this information. This is, teach it to the, like, all the kids and apprentices come around. Like, teach it to them.
Could be like another neat thing too, is to like learn, if like you went to the observatory and you could track like when the next pumpkin moon is going to be.
The old pumpkin moon.
The old pumpkin moon.
I like that.
Pumpkin moon.
The pumpkin moon is coming. It's like, oh, this will be it.
That's cool.
Pumpkin moon is good.
That's really cool. Yeah, the moon turns slightly orange.
Yeah. And then all the little spirits come.
One of the images that captured my imagination was seeing a witch with a jack-o'-lantern like helmet, essentially, right? Like that's on their head, and that's a question of, is this like a transfiguration type thing where they have turned their head into a jack-o'-lantern, or have they put one over their head and there's some interaction with that spirit that's in there, right?
Yeah.
What is that something we want to embrace? Like, what is that?
So when I was first seeing that, I was thinking like only powerful witches in this coven have gained access to, like, because we think of the 3 witches that lead, well, like you could imagine there's there's heads of all the covens, and you'd imagine 3 of them, I think the Fishhead coven has like 30 or something like that, right? It's like the 3 and 30 or something.
There are the 3 major ones, and then there's a bunch of like other
sub ones underneath them. But you could imagine maybe the 3 top witches at this location or at this coven have all, like, whatever this process is, have turned their heads into jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah.
You got to try it at least once.
You got to try it at least once.
Yeah, if they get to
I tried it in college.
Yeah, they could be called like the lantern heads. There's like maybe one lantern head maybe alive at any point. And
lantern heads.
Yeah. It's like, but yeah, if you,
what is that experience? Like, what is that?
Oof.
I mean, if you have these, at least one of these kind of smaller pest spirits swirling around in there, is this an act of like communing with this spirit in a way?
Yeah.
And what insight does that give you? Like, what would that do?
Wow.
So to think of a different subclass here, the spirit fused fighter, who, what we kind of discuss is that this is a person who interacted with or was in the same space as a dying spirit, and that spirit connected with them, and part of their essence kind of bonded with this fighter, and now they have the ability to whelm objects and do things like that. They can kind of tap into some of that latent magic that the spirit kind of gave to them as they were passing, and they've fused into one thing. And so with that existing in the world, that happens on accident. What if the witches at this coven go through like a purposeful transition where they're like, I'm gonna bond with this spirit, and I'm gonna give it access to me, and in return I'll get some things, but it's going to change. I'm going to be permanently changed. Like, this is not a helmet.
You now have a pumpkin head.
This is my head. This is my life. This is like, it's a thing that maybe some witches might have the capability of doing, but have not done it because it's a scary process, and there's a lot of commitment to the coven.
It makes me almost think that I would love to see, like, is this Obojima's version of a lich?
Oh, that's interesting. Wow, that's cool. Yeah. Like, you've become one with the patch, like
One with the patch.
you actually, maybe you kind of can hive mind. Like, you can now are connected to all the jack-o'-lanterns anywhere.
You could see through the
You
eyes
could
of
see
jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah.
It could be a situation where it's like your hit points, you can drop below hit point or below 0 and be fine, so long as you have a jack-o'-lantern existing somewhere. But the reverse of that is, even if you're at max hit points and all of your jack-o'-lanterns are smashed, then you instantly pass. And so it's like this connection where it's like, I am immortal, but not. Like, these things are keeping me alive.
Have all of these pumpkin horcruxes.
And a kid could kick one of them, and like there's and it would like it like pull at my soul.
Which then kind of in like Obojiman culture, like depending on how you view these like witches, it could be like you've got to don't kick a jack-o'-lantern, like, or keep a jack-o'-lantern lit all the time because you're at some, it keeps the lantern heads living. But if you don't like them, then you're like, smash them all, like smash all the pumpkins, and it's like, or like, don't celebrate, Halloween or something like.
And it'd almost be like, is there secrecy behind like which of their? Do you know like the each pumpkin head or each lantern head has three pumpkins, and it's like, you wouldn't dare ask which ones are theirs. Like, they're hidden around the village or they're hidden in the patch, but like, it's just like you don't ask them.
Never.
And then if
reveal.
someone finds one of them out, maybe it's a limited number. Like, maybe you can't remake these or something, and someone finds it out and they have this information on one of the lantern heads. They're holding it over them. I know where 2 of your heads are. I know where 2 of your jack-o'-lanterns are.
If we want to keep it on the person as opposed to like distributing it out, you could also have it where if they knock the head off, right? Like, it's not. I mean, how is it attached, right? So if it becomes your head, but they find a way to knock your pumpkin head off, like that, that's it.
Just rolls around.
Now it's just a pumpkin again.
Oh man. Okay.
Anyway, that's
this is great. I love them, but there's so much more. There's so much more to talk about here. Pumpkin magic is what other forms of magic? There is another piece of artwork that we saw of a person with a pumpkin head, and we're like, oh, it's a little kid, and it's not a little kid. They are.
It's like a
little wooden
puppet
structure puppet, like a little candle, and so that it's either upgrading one of the jack-o'-lanterns, like they've figured out a way to, or it's like a semi-servant type thing. They're either taking one of the jack-o'-lanterns and giving it arms and legs temporarily.
This says something really interesting about like the lantern head sort of / lich person, that when you take and you embody a jack-o'-lantern head, you're kind of becoming another kind of creature. Because if you took a jack-o'-lantern head and put it on a wooden puppet body, and then that wooden puppet body animated and had some sort of agency, that kind of says something that these things can animate like non-animate objects. So if you have a lantern head on your body, you're kind of being animated by some force in there as well. And there might be a battle of wills, or it might be you're kind of a symbiont where you and this
That's
other spirit thing are living together.
The symbiont's a good way to think about it, or that's an interesting way to think about it. I mean, I could even, going back to the subclass for a moment,
Just pulls
I can
it back.
imagine. I mean, it could be something interesting that at higher levels, you're no longer humanoid and you become spirit, right? Like that's something that could change. Like your nature is changing, the longer you spend with this thing.
Yeah.
Which could be kind of cool, but like the symbiont is just is an interesting idea there.
Makes me think of like an Eberron, like the Kalashtar. They've taken in a Kori spirit, and they're kind of living in this sort of like the spirit is using their body to move around and operate in the world. It could be that when you take on a pumpkin head, you're kind of now allowing whatever the spirits that animate these, or that these pumpkins are vessels for, now kind of lives within you. And there could be, people could have, opinions about that. They could be like, oh, that's not good, or you should just leave spirits alone, or whatever they think. Or it could be also that you're bringing in, maybe you could communicate with Obojima, or you have an understanding of, the natural processes of the island, or you understand what the great beasts are about a bit more. I mean, I don't know. Who knows what information you get from these spirits?
I feel like we could almost treat it like smoking in the 60s, where they're like, we don't really know what the effects are, but we're going to pretend like they're not bad.
It looks
they're
cool.
really cool.
They're really cool. So like the like these people that have taken on lantern heads, maybe there's just a couple of them, and people are like, what is this? Like the oldest person with the lantern head has only had it for 10 years. And they're like, and maybe it's like, maybe they're starting to get a little wilder, a little more unique, eccentric. And it's like, what's going on with them? What do they look like in 20 years? Like, are they fully, have we like, or maybe there's one that's like 30 years old and it's like, they're in the woods. Like we've given them their own place. Yeah, they're dealing with pumpkin rot. And there's like, it deteriorates. Like you are more powerful for this time, but pumpkins don't last forever.
I mean, depending on like whether that, like, let's say, okay, going back to the subclass, if this is a subclass, you are a pumpkin witch, and at, level 15, 17, whatever, you can get a pumpkin head. But then ultimately, I think the destiny of that character is maybe this thing at some point you have to wander to find a new place to patch. And then your head grows and all these vines grow out and you create a new pumpkin patch of these kinds of strange pumpkins.
Is this okay? Is this crazy to say that like at a certain level in this subclass you roll a dice and it says this is how many years you have left to live?
Yeah, you're patching up after,
or like this is how many months you have left to live. It's like here if you take on this form, roll 2d12. That is you in 16 months. You will go on. You'll pass. You've taken from nature. You've taken spirits. You've had this fulfilling life, and now you'll go back to the dirt.
Yeah, I think also we've kind of said that a couple times in like Obojima's stories where your character comes to an end.
Yeah.
You know, we've done that, I think, with the Corrupted Ranger. Like there is this possibility that once you reach level, super high level, the corruption takes you over and you
succumb to sickness.
Yeah. You could turn into a demon or you have to like sort of resolve what your character's struggle is at that point. But that's it. You're done.
I mean, but you could also do a thing like the reverse of, you're talking about that fighter subclass where as a spirit is kind of, their essence is diminishing and they are able to kind of leave some of like their, like residual essence with a person. I'm imagining like, your end is coming. The idea that they would know is also fascinating just from a character perspective. Like you're going to be done in 16 months or whatever.
The next pumpkin moon.
But that if you're able to go and you're able to kind of go to that patch and you're creating this new thing and you release that spirit, because there's still a spirit within you, that some aspect of you is now with that spirit. So there is this sense of like, yeah, you were gone, but there is that sense of there's an eternal quality to you now. Like you're part of this spirit in some way. What that means, I have no idea, but it could be interesting.
But I love that though.
It's cool.
I love, and I don't want it to be high. I want it to be like 10th level. I want it 10th level. Like at 10th level, you get this countdown clock, and if the DM wants to get you to 20th, they totally can. You have 16 months to do it. And maybe you could be like you roll on a table and it's weeks, months, years. But like, I love playing with the months. And I think that's so, and if they're connected to the spirit, you could like, maybe there's just this internal clock. You can feel it like, I don't have long to live. Maybe when you do it, when you transition, you have your head, the other elders are with you and they're like, yeah, the spirit energy is fading. We'll give you 3 more moons. We'll give you 3 more pumpkin moons.
So, sorry.
No.
There's something really interesting there. Again, I don't know if this is good or not, but there's something interesting in that you get to a point where you're reaching kind of the end of what this jack-o'-lantern head can do, right? Its integrity is starting to fail. It's on the cusp of it or whatever. You can kind of feel it. But because if that's associated with the level, right? Like you get to this level, this kind of transformation is starting to happen. It also could be that things you do can accelerate that, but you get that like kind of really cool moment, right?
If you use power, you
take months off.
You burn your wick.
Now the question though is, this is the hard part because it's not really natural to D&D, is the passage of time beyond hours, right? Like when you start getting into days, okay, it could accommodate days. When you start talking about weeks and months, D&D passage of time starts, or role-playing games in general, it starts to get a little nebulous there.
Yeah. And
so one of the things to solve is going to be, well, how do you actually track that in practical terms? How long is a campaign? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in sessions usually more than weeks or months.
And I think as a DM, if you're running a character, one of your players has one of these pumpkin witches, and you're kind of already started to think about like, okay, what's the end of their character arc and how am I going to tell this story so that it's a satisfying completion to that. And then it could be at the session, the previous session, you're like, hey, you start to feel it, like a few coven witches have come around, or the pumpkin witches are coming around you, and they're starting to realize like your lantern head transformation has taken place, and you're kind of revered because they know that your time is limited and you're going to eventually create, like maybe you create a new pumpkin patch somewhere. But as a DM, you're figuring all that in to the story. And then, you're setting something up for that player to ultimately, that's the end of their character, their story. Is
there a way, like if I get to that point where I've now fused with this thing is part of me, in D&D terms, is that essentially would that be considered a curse that can be removed? If I were to separate myself from this thing, let's say it's a dangerous thing to do, I'm able to separate because we don't know. This is new tech, right? Like new magical breakthroughs. But it's like, okay, we're going to perform this magical surgery to remove this head and restore yours. But then you essentially you've lost that class, right? Like you've lost touch with that. Is that also a thing? It's like, yeah, I've been disconnected from my powers. Like that's it.
Like what happens if somebody casts remove curse on let's say a druid, and all of a sudden it's like, now you're no longer a druid. All your abilities are gone. Like,
So that's something where like this, because it's an external thing, where I like with a druid, this is something that D&D never really explores, is the idea of separating you from your powers, right? That's not really a thing. But because this is an external concept where, I mean, I guess the same thing could be true for a warlock, right? A warlock gets their powers from another entity. Yeah. What if something happens to that entity,
Yeah.
If that
That's
being
it.
gets destroyed, right?
No more. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a great narrative thing. So there's no rules for that.
Yeah.
But as a DM, if let's say I had a warlock, who had a pact with a fiend, and that fiend gets killed, obviously you want it by somebody in the party because you want the paladin to do it because then it's fun. But something, let's say something happens to that warlock is now essentially they have no patron, so they could either find a new patron. So there's a little bit different there, but there's a narrative reason why that character could be separated from their powers. In this case, if I am playing this, which again, part of the subclass conversation, if I have this kind of jack-o'-lantern head, if I'm a lantern head, and that is removed in some way, let's say with a removed curse, because I've often, like, I guess, would it be classified in D&D terms as a curse? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Or is there some ritual that has to be performed? That's probably more of a, hey, DM, if that's where you want your story to go, figure it out.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about that.
I feel like we probably offer a couple options.
Mm-hmm.
I could also see a possibility, like, being, if you want to fix this, you need to go to the spirit realm. And then you go into the spirit realm and you talk to some great elder spirit. You speak with them. And maybe even then they're like, you're bonded with the spirit. Maybe it's even this. I can let the spirit live on. Like, your body will die. Mm-hmm. And you can have some comfort knowing that your companion's not going to die with you. That is what I can do for you.
And, we've said in other stuff that, like what looks, you're in the material realm and you see a person, and then you go into the spirit realm and that there's something totally different there.
Yeah.
Like this lantern head thing could look different in the spirit realm. Like you see the actual, like it just manifests as a jack-o'-lantern in the physical realm, but in the spirit realm, it could be like this, giant, venturi of energy that's coming into your head,
Maybe there's no pumpkin, but there's just, it looks like 100 swarming butterflies, like flaming butterflies.
Or just this huge vine, that comes out and it's like, So, but at that point, it could be that, your essence, your whatever it is, your energy is going to be absorbed into this spirit entity, and it's just going to exist in the spirit realm, and that'll be that.
It's interesting. Okay, so we've gone past our episode timing, but
what already?
I know
time flies.
But I reset it here. We've got some more time.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
That being said, I want to jump into a few other things. One, I want to talk about a concept I had after you mentioned something. You talked about passing time and things like that, and it made me realize that there's something we could do. This is quite different, but we could build a calendar year. Like an actual, like maybe this special character has a calendar on the back of their character sheet, and we could mark the timings of the moon, and maybe at certain times they get special things during the moon, and we just build in time tracking into it. Like, this is somewhat important to this character, and so they're going to track time, and it's just, as a DM, you understand it. Maybe it's a feat that you can get or something. Maybe it's not built into the base subclass.
I will say, I'm going to pop this balloon a little bit, or at least let some air out of it, only because so I grew up a big fan of Dragonlance.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of the Dragonlance world building was they have 3 moons on the world of Kryn.
Sure.
And that there were wizards that were associated with each of these moons. Mm-hmm. And in the original kind of system of Dragonlance, you had to track the waxing and waning of each of the 3 moons to see, right now the red-robed wizards are ascendant because the red moon is,
Sure.
And so it becomes very tedious because that person's always asking the DM, so what phase of the moon is it?
Yeah.
And the DM's like, I don't know, man.
But what we could do to make it easier, I think, by having a tracker of some sort, is rather than the DM having to, like, all of the information's there for the player, and they just need to keep a general understanding of, like, time that has passed. And so it's like, if all of the information's sitting there, I mean, I feel like we could do it. I feel like Dragonlance has been some time. I think we could. I think the 3 of us could come up with a system that's not terrible.
I hope that's true. Yeah, because
it can be done, but should it be done? That's the thing.
I think the idea of a character dying after a certain amount of time is good enough that we should do it.
That's cool.
And that alone, we should figure out how to keep track of time.
And that feels like no. I was gonna say that feels like something that when you hit that moment in your character, that now is a conversation between that player and the DM. Like, how do we want to approach this now? Yeah, right. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, okay, so that we were in that dungeon for 8 hours. Okay, so that's a third of a day, and I have to make sure that it could get really spreadsheet tracky kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a conversation with the DM. The DM could be like, since we went on that adventure, it's been about 4 days.
Sure.
Okay. Cool.
Another thing you could do to give the same effect is just like you could say time expends magic or time expends essence and make it points. And then all you have to do is talk to the DM and say,
pool.
How much points have expended? To use my ability, I expended 2 points.
That's so weird because like if you are attaching it to time, where time also removes points, right? So it's like it's going to diminish slowly or fast, right? Depending on what you're doing. So it's so weird because now when I take an 8-hour rest, I take a long rest. It's like my hit points went up, but this is actually like spending energy.
Diminishing me, yeah. Yeah, and I feel like there's something there. There's something that we could cobble together to make it work.
I know that generally, players tend to like look kind of negatively at anything that is a drawback mechanic. That's generally how it goes. But I think that the idea of talking about again, these are conversations that DM will have with players about what is the life cycle of a character, right? Is it to just keep them going for as long as possible? Or is it there's an arc for this character and there's actually a moment to sunset that character and say goodbye, right? Like that character's story has been told.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that in games that I played, particularly either kind of limited games or one-shots, the idea of knowing that I want to do something cool for the end of my character, build something up. You tell me your character has 1 month to live, and the more of these types of powers that they're using, I get less. I'm like, I'm going to go out the biggest bang possible. Mm-hmm. Like, this will be something to remember, right? Like I know that now.
I'm literally going to change the landscape.
Yep.
Like where the battle that kills me will be a pumpkin patch that will live on for hundreds of years.
I'm now part of Obojima.
Yeah.
Like that's a really cool way to say goodbye to a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if you play the subclass, I think we shy away from the Lich idea where you're immortal. And I think we say you're very mortal. You're the most mortal of all the subclasses. You have a timer.
And also there's a cool thing, like no matter where you roam on Obojima, if you come across a pumpkin patch, like on the mountainside, you're like, there was some lantern head died here.
Yeah. Especially if left. That's
a cool cultural thing.
It's almost like the imparting cliff for Adara.
Yeah.
It's interesting also in that you'd see these pumpkin patches growing in places they wouldn't normally, right? So you know that you might find a naturally one. Somebody who's a farmer has planted a pumpkin patch. But let's say you're on the slope of Mount Arbora and it's like you come across this like green area and there's like a pumpkin patch. Like, what is this? Like, there's a lantern head that died here. There's probably an epic battle here.
Yeah. Cool.
That's on the side of Mount Arbora. There's a giant bestial boar skeleton, and inside of it is growing a bunch of.
That's pretty cool.
What would be weird is just like underwater and just like all these floating, glowing jack-o'-lanterns on vines, just like kind of waving in the current.
Okay, so this is the coolest thing we've ever made, and I love it so much.
No idea where this is going at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with this idea, and
Next time we see you, you're going to have a lantern head.
Next time you see me, I'm going to have a lantern head. No, I think there's honestly, I almost want to say that there's another podcast episode for this.
Subclass?
Part 2?
I feel like there's a part 2.
Part 2.
And we'll figure that out. But there's more to be said. But for today, we have to pull a close. So, thank you so much for joining us. This was the Obojima Podcast. You can catch more content on YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music. And you can catch us on Discord, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above. And we're going to be producing more content, doing cool stuff. And
As we do.
yeah, it'll always be fun. So thank you so much for joining us. And we will catch you later. This was Adam and Ari and myself, Jeremiah. And we are signing out.